Welcome back to A Fine Time for Healing, a place where your physical, emotional, and spiritual well being are all that matters. So put your feet up, relax, and enjoy today's show. We have with us today Eileen Marder-Mirman, who is a spiritual healer and licensed psychotherapist. For the past 45 years, she specializes in integrating spirituality, meditation, essential oils, and other alternative healing in her work. She lives in New York with her husband and her two cats. And Eileen has some wonderful things to say. We're going to talk today. I got to get it in there. Okay, there
There
it
it
is.
is.
How I Think I Should Be is BS, From Hiddenness to Open-Hearted, Healing Memoir, not just for professional women. And I have to tell all of you that it's really for everyone. So, you know, it's if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're professional, if you're not, it doesn't matter. You're going to get a lot of great information out of this. Good morning, Eileen, and welcome.
Thank you, Randy. Pleasure to meet you.
Okay. When I first saw this title, I'm like, how I think should be BS. And I thought, well, what could she possibly be saying about that? Because the way we think is the way we think. However, then I thought, okay, well, I also know that we tell ourselves a lot of lies. We have a lot of limiting beliefs, and we carry on the programming and conditioning from our childhood. And then I realized, okay, now I really get what the title is about. And that's exactly what it is.
It's true. It's true. And we carry on from our lineage also, right? So everything gets passed down. In the trauma gets passed down, but also the ability to survive gets passed down, because here we are in 2023, living vibrant lives. So in spite of all the stuff. So
Exactly. In your introduction, you say, and this I think will speak to everybody. As a child, I unconsciously developed a powerful manifesto. Don't be who you are. Stay safe and hidden at all costs. How
so
many of us feel that way?
probably most people. Well, most people that are awake to it, right? You might not be awake to it, and then you don't know that that's the programming that's been, set, sort of like being stuck in the matrix, right?
Right. And was there a particular difference about the way you were brought up versus the way someone else might have been brought up?
I think that, over the years, I've worked with people from different cultures, with different religious backgrounds. And I have to say that it seemed, and I work not just with women, but with men as well,
Okay.
and people of all different types of gender identities. And it seems to be the message for survival, no matter where you come from, who you are, how you identify, and how you've chosen to live. And I do believe that we all have this calling to wake up to what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what's real for inside of us. It's a big thing, get in touch with what your path is. What's your path? I don't think you could really get in touch with what your path is unless you also identify all these limiting beliefs that aren't even conscious. We want to wake up to what's going on inside of us.
Hmm. That's so true.
Yeah.
Right, because we are all about survival. And unless we're shown a very, very healthy way to do this, and most people aren't, because, unless you have a very awakened, aware parent who knows how to put all of this into their children, most of us have to figure this out on our own. And the other thing is that you were born into a Jewish family, as I was, and that comes with it its whole all the customs and the tendencies and all the traditions and all the things. And of course, I mean, I was raised with Jewish guilt. That's how my mother raised me. Guilt,
Mhm.
that's how she controlled her daughters, through guilt. So, so we grow up with some very strange messages.
Yeah, it's really true. And to not be the self is very disorienting. And then you learn how to adjust to being disoriented, and you think that that's normal or regular or reality. And it's actually not reality. But as a child, and as a child, many of us know there's something off, but we have to tote the line, right? We have to be a certain way. So in order to
Exactly.
be appreciated in the family, in order to be appreciated in school, and so on. So,
Exactly. Fitting
yeah.
in is very important.
Yeah.
So in your chapter one, you talk about being born with a force, and as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, so many of us came into the world this way from that generation. And I
Yes.
never really thought about how cold and sterile it was. But talk a little bit about what that experience was, because I could completely relate. It was exactly what my birth experience was, but I never really looked back and said, wow, that really had to have an impact on me.
Yeah. So, over the years, I've done all sorts of work on myself, right? And I still found that physically, in many ways, I was very limited. And then trauma, even though we were working with trauma as therapists over the years, trauma became like a frontliner, right? The headline on the newspapers or certainly on the internet. And I started to say, like, I had trauma from the very beginning. And even though there's obviously trauma in our history, there was literally in this very moment when you're coming into the world completely raw, completely vulnerable, completely fragile, there was this force that came upon me. And I believe it's affected me. In fact, my subtitle is From Hiddenness to Open Hearted. I believe that the hiddenness is a result of that. In order to survive this instrument, which killed many of the children and really injured a lot of the mothers, the birthing mothers, I think that affected me in many ways that I still work with today. I'm not hidden, but I could feel anxiety sometimes at a very deep level. It's like it doesn't rise up until there's something really shocking, which I mention a few of them in the book, but um, I think it really is the ground that I was mm, raised within. And that had nothing to do with my parents at all. That had to do with the conditions of the times.
Right. And so you're talking about forceps births, right?
For
Where
me,
they
it was
yank
forceps.
you out of the mother. And the other thing about it is at that time, because we're only 4 years different, so I was in the same generation. At that time, mothers were put to sleep, so they didn't have to feel anything. So the baby is born, they don't even know it. The baby doesn't bond with the mother. It's taken, it's cleaned by strangers. The first person that sees it is really the father. They take it to the father, but the mother really doesn't bond with that baby immediately, which is very different than how they do it these days.
That's so true. So true.
So it really does have an impact on how we start out life, because that is a terrifying experience for a
That's right.
soul to come into this world like that.
That's right. And in fact, I would say that the first person I probably bonded with, and probably you as well, was the doctor. Who's pulling you out, touching you first, and then the nurses. So here we are in the helping professions. So
Interesting.
there's a lot to think about and to ponder, and it's all been quite a journey.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm just okay. Um, I know that you suffered with some fertility issues, miscarriages, things like that, which is absolutely heartbreaking. So you had one child, right? Now all that was just like it just happened and everything. And then after that, there was a series of miscarriages. Tell us how that affected you.
Well, So I actually had my first miscarriage before I was pregnant with Josh.
Okay.
I didn't think much of it. They said, "Oh, that's a common thing. Don't worry about it." And I was 28 at that point, and I said, "Okay, I won't worry about it." And then I got pregnant a few months later with Josh, and that was a full-term pregnancy. I had a very difficult labor though, because I didn't have enough progesterone. So the way it affected me was it didn't make any sense. I was so confused. Here I was, I was very athletic and I was as healthy as you could be back in your late 20s, and not knowing about nutrition back in those days. And but I was still in pretty good shape and so on. It just didn't make sense. We went to all these different doctors to try to figure out what was going on. Years later, they came out with the saliva tests and for hormones, and I took it, and I was devastated when I got my results because I had practically no progesterone in my system,
Wow.
and that's what you need to carry pregnancy.
If
So
only they had known.
if they, and this isn't that long ago, so this was in 83, and I gave birth with Josh in 84, and then afterwards I guess I had less progesterone for all those other longer term miscarriages.
And
And
I bring this up because infertility is a unusually large problem right now for women.
yeah.
Um, I don't, I don't remember it being that way in my 20s when my friends and me were, planning to have babies, having babies. Yeah, so it may take some of us a little bit longer, but infertility right now, so many young women are going through in vitro fertilization right now. I don't really understand what that's about. I know it's a really difficult experience. My daughter went through it 4 times, and she has a beautiful baby boy now. But it's very, very hard on a woman to go through that. And so, you know, this whole experience of wanting a baby and not being able to either get pregnant or carry the baby to full term is a very traumatic thing for a woman.
Right. And there were no books about it, right? There
Right.
was no books about it. So there was no internet, right? There were no groups, nothing. So and I didn't know anybody else who was going through it. So I felt very alone.
Mhm.
And I probably had a low level of depression early on.
Mhm.
Um, but I kept going. I said, okay, what am I going to do? And the truth of the matter is that as a therapist, I think I became, I really used my experiences and always have used my experiences as learning. Like, okay, what's this about? What am I going to get from this? How can I learn and how could I teach others? Which is why I wrote the book, because I've always felt this thing that I could help others,
Mhm.
not just my small practice or the small classes that I teach. Um, and I just kept on, as the Grateful Dead would say, as the doodah man, kept on trucking like the doodah man, always showing up. Oh, even though I would walk around and I would see, like, there was a methadone clinic near where we used to live and where I work, near the rehab center where I worked, and there were tons of people on methadone. It's like I can't have more than one full pregnancy. And these people had one in the oven and two in the stroller, and they were, well, at least they were doing methadone, right? So they were in rehabilitation and not out on the streets. But still, it didn't make sense. And then I had to look at the larger picture. And looking at the larger picture of how can there must be something for me to do here besides, you know, wallowing in my self-pity about that the life that I thought I was going to have isn't the life that I had. So and that really helped because I just kept working on myself, always transforming myself. I still work on myself, and working with others, and being able to be with people in their sorrow and their pain and their loss. I also was able to do, I was living at Long Island, for 39 and a half years raising Josh out there. And I was doing some bereavement groups. I was able to be with people in their sorrow and their pain, whether it was because of adults that lost their children from AIDS, parents. I was working with a group there, and I worked with other kinds of bereavement groups because I didn't question people. I never said you have to move on. I never said there's another way. I just said, let me be with you. Let me listen to you. And I get it, even though my story is different than your story.
Mm-hmm. That's a hard thing to do. And, as you're saying this, I landed on your quote, which you say, loss has been my teacher. I am no longer afraid of it. Now I know that part of the fabric of life is to live and to lose and to live with loss. That is really profound. Because many people will say, what did I do wrong? What did I do in my last life? Why am I being punished? Instead of having the perspective that these are things that we all go through, and they're not supposed to be life sentences. They're life lessons. They're ways that we build and get stronger and grow.
It's really true. There are opportunities. What's that Chinese symbol about difficulty? I think it's difficulty is really about opportunity. And it's just really true. And it hasn't been easy. I'm not saying that that it's easy. But there's joy within the difficulty.
I agree. And, pretty much everyone that I've had on this podcast, and I've been doing it for over 12 years and interviewed over 500 people, but everyone who's in helping fields, and most people all have histories of pain and loss. And it's when they have triumphed over it is when they now can become, beacons of light for other people.
Yeah.
It's the way it happens. I wanted to talk to you about control, because in chapter 7, Why Awaken, you say, part of me was focused on staying safe. I wanted guarantees and to stay in control as if that were possible. I stayed tight and asleep. What do you mean by that?
Oh gosh. When we wake up to the truth. We think we're in reality. We think we know the truth. But when we start to really be honest with ourselves, to know that I have anxiety, I wanted to be this hippie, cool girl, to realize I had anxiety, that I could actually have depression, that I could actually have physical problems. Here I was this athlete and now I have physical problems. It's like, really? So there is no control. We just moved. We sold our house after almost 40 years. And if I thought I had any semblance of control after all the work I've done, going through selling your house and moving and then coming into a little apartment after living in a house, I realized, you know what? There's no control. I know this. There's only the unknown. I know this. There's only uncertainty. I know this. And here we go again. And being unsettled also. We're not even here a month. Friday will be a month.
Oh wow.
So, it's like I'm living everything I teach and that I've gone through, but it's like a deeper level. Thank you very much. Here we go.
Yes. Control. It's so important for everyone to understand that, the expression going with the flow, there's really a reason for that.
Yeah.
Because anytime you think you're in control of anything, you're so wrong, right? But it's hard to let that go if that's been something that you've held on to that has made you feel somewhat safe. But it ultimately will become a major problem for you in your life if you don't learn to let that go.
Yeah. Somebody, I was posting on Instagram, and Facebook about the move, what I was going through and so on. And one woman who's a couple of at least 10 years older than me, she said, or maybe even more, she said, about it's seeing all the 40 years of the life that's gone by. I said, I hear you. I agree with that. Yeah, there's sadness and grief in that, but it's really been a process of letting go. I couldn't take all my clothes with me. I couldn't take all my furniture with me.
Mm.
I sold a ton of stuff. Some stuff didn't sell. I was watching and crying as they were crushing the furniture from my office because I couldn't find somebody that would take the donation.
Mm.
But, so letting go, letting go, letting go.
Letting go. Yeah.
Not easy.
And also, I think you talk about struggling with the idea of conflict and, in relationships. What did
Yep.
you learn about conflict and how important it is for us to have it in the right way?
So I used to think that you shouldn't have conflict in relationship, that everything should be nicey nice and flow and just be, I don't know, sort of like fantasy land. And then I realized, I was married pretty young, so I realized pretty young that it's just part of a relationship. It's part of life. I mean, I don't think there's any really good relationship that I have that we haven't had some conflict. And I need to talk about it. We need to transform it, be with it, be in relationship with it, and then move on from there. Because if we don't, then talk about control, then we're holding all the stuff inside of us, and then it's not a real relationship.
That's true. It's true. Um, what is healthy conflict and unhealthy? What's the difference between healthy and unhealthy conflict?
So, for me, a big thing is to always own our own stuff, even if we think we're right about
Right.
whatever the topic is, whatever we said, whatever we shared, or whatever's going on. But to own my stuff, like, what's this about for me? Where was I coming from? Why was this a problem? And the more I own my stuff, and I could do it very quickly now, because if I'm in a session with somebody, I need to own my stuff constantly in order to be open to receiving what I'm hearing, feeling, and perceiving with somebody.
That's true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So unhealthy is when we don't own our shit. I was saying, when we don't own our shit and we put it on the other, it's all you, it's all you, it's all you. And the truth is, nothing is all somebody else. When we're in relationship, it's ours and theirs.
So true. Yeah, you say true freedom comes from being with the dissonances and difficulties and not getting rid of anything, but being willing to develop a relationship with what we feared and that which we pushed away. Wow.
Yep.
That's big. That's big.
Yeah.
And then you say the question, why awaken? So you talk about awakening and how important it was in your journey. Why is it important to awaken? And really, let's start with what awakening means to you.
Awakening means being in touch with where you are as best as you can, in little steps. And if you just allow yourself to be in touch with the littlest thing of where you are. I always do this every morning. And you just stay with it at least for a few minutes. I'm able to do it for much longer, but if you stay with it for a few minutes, there's something that happens in your body, mind, and spirit where you feel more present. And then you're able to deal with relationships, going to work, walking the dog, feeding the cat, whatever the situation is. And so awakening is really about being present to where we are And then we can be in touch with the world as it is. And it's not such a pretty world. So if we're at least in touch with where we are and we get freaked out by some stuff that's going on, well, we could shut off the news. We could come back into ourselves. We could dim the lights, or we could go outside, sit outside, go for a walk, go into nature, have a cup of tea, whatever it is, so that you could just be more of yourself. It's really about becoming who you were born to be.
Which is very different than this woke generation, which is not about awakening at all.
Yeah, I've heard about
it. I guess you have. I guess you have. It's a very strange word, because it doesn't fit the situation. It doesn't fit the mindset at all.
Yeah, I was actually confused by it. I just didn't understand. And I think some people, not all, obviously, are being misled that it's more about becoming in touch with the true self and being in true reality than this other thing that's happening.
Exactly. In your book, you talk about all your favorite people and all your favorite musicians, and I'm like, oh, I like that person. I like that person. I loved Carole King, James Taylor. They're just my, Jesse Colin Young, Dylan, the Allman Brothers, Joan Baez. I mean, all really, really good people. So I just wanted to say how much I related to that music, and I still do. It's still to me the best, right?
I do love it.
You say, I started to pay attention to my inner voice. As I listened to it, it became louder and took more of a prominent place inside of me. I felt less threatened about sensing and knowing about negative things, as well as those things that would help me. I wasn't willing to turn myself and my intuition off any longer. Yeah. Sometimes it was helpful, sometimes it was devastating. When was it helpful and when was it devastating?
Well, I would say it's helpful every day. Helpful every day to be in touch with where I am and what I'm picking up and so on. So I think that's all wonderful and good, because it helps keep me on track and in touch. I'll just say a quick example was I always knew that this would work out for the apartment, for the move, but then going through the messiness wasn't so easy. But I always knew in my gut that everything was going to be okay. But I didn't know, did it mean we were going to end up here, which we did, or were we going to end up renting an apartment? And I found some nice apartments to rent. But anyway, so that like recently came up. What's devastating is, I knew about, I had a dream and I knew about 9/11. I think it was the day before, 2 days before, I had a dream about it. And when I was going to Israel many years ago, oh no, it couldn't have been many years ago. It was 9/11. So it was August of that year. Some of my clients were very upset with me that I was going to visit family in Israel. And I said, why? It could happen here too. So to know that I am in touch with a stream of consciousness is all I could say that it is, where I know some things that are devastating. That said,
what year are you talking about when you went there?
Well, I used to go before the pandemic every year.
Okay.
Since my brother moved there a long time ago. Josh is 39, so 38 years ago he moved there. 39 years ago, a long time ago. Okay. And so I used to go every year, and there's a lot of terrorist stuff there. But you know what? The United States has the worst level percentage of shootings, these crazy shootings, than anywhere else in the world. So
And
We have to,
Israel's prepared. They're prepared for it. They know how to handle it.
yeah.
But there was a year, I asked the year because there was a year that my daughter wanted to go to birthright, and it was really in the middle of some I can't remember exactly what was going on in Israel, but it was a very chaotic time there. And I wouldn't let her go. But, years later, when my son wanted to go, it was fine, and I let him go with no problem. So I have a niece that lives there in Jerusalem, and she absolutely loves it. The people who live there, um, that's not an issue for them. They love their country, they love living there, and that threat is not one that dissuades them from enjoying that lifestyle.
It's true. It's really true.
So, okay. Chapter 19, you talk about aggression. And this paragraph just resonated with me from so many people I've talked to. And I like the way you put this, but you say, when there is too much focus on bringing a child up to be good, respectful, appreciative, and not questioning of authority in any way, there are often problems because the child doesn't learn to question or to have their own creative ideas or intuition. Their actions have to pass through an approval screen before they act on them. I love the way you say that. I've had people say to me, I wasn't prepared for this world. I wasn't prepared for the things that I was going to come up against because I had an idyllic life,
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we need to own our aggression. We need to know that we have it in us. How else would we get up and go to the bathroom that literally takes a certain level of aggression. It's on the physical level. But if we don't take care of ourselves and go to the bathroom when we need to, then we're stymieing ourselves,
Stymieing ourselves, right?
Stymieing ourselves and stopping a natural process. There's this great article, I think I quoted it, by a woman. Actually, it was in a book, a Gestalt therapy book, because I was a Gestalt therapist for many years, and Laura Pearls, and she said that what happened with the Gestalt therapy people was they were all Jewish psychotherapists, and she was a dancer living in Austria. And as the Nazis started to come over, they all left Austria and they went down to South Africa. And they developed the theory of Gestalt therapy. And what she was saying was, when you're told to act like a soldier, when you're told to be a certain way, that's how you develop into a fascist. And that's what's happened. And it's obviously been going on ever since in hidden ways, but now it's coming out more over the past, I guess, 6 years or so, 7 years. So if we own our aggression, then we're not going to act it out. When we own our aggression, we could have healthier bodies. We could eat healthier, and just live healthier and have more vitality. A lot of people do Kundalini yoga to help them feel that energy rising. I don't do Kundalini yoga, but it's the same kind of a thing. We want to allow ourselves to feel our life force. And if we're capping it down, then we're losing probably at least 50% of who we are.
So life force and our own aggression are really kind of one and the same in your mind, in your opinion?
I think aggression, creativity, just vitality, all of it is that same life force coming through us. Mm-hmm. And then it gets all screwy because of the lessons we've been taught by the culture, by our families, by the lineage, by our teachers, and so on. And how we think we should be. I'm a wife, I should be this way. I'm a mother, I should be this way. I'm a grandmother, I should be that way. And I'm a knitter, I should be this way. So.
And the operative word in all of those is should. Right. I always tell people that they're like, well, shouldn't I? or, isn't this expected? I said, there's no shoulds. There's no shoulds. You have to do what's right for you. As long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not making anybody else's life miserable,
Right.
you
Right.
get to do it your way.
Right. That's an important piece that you added, because a lot of people over the years, especially in the early years of therapy, they'll start to get a sense of themselves and start to feel empowered, and they'll bulldoze their way through life. I can do this. This is what I feel. This is who I am, and so on. And they're not considering the other, because, talk about, I know you talk about narcissism, talk about being like not focused on the self enough, and then too focused on the self. And then there's, I'm wearing a gray t-shirt, and then there's all the gray in between, right? How can I be authentic and in relationship with others and have this healthy, it's really healthy aggression, healthy narcissism, healthy everything.
Ego, whatever it is.
Yeah, healthy everything.
Right, healthy ego. And I have seen, people who get it wrong like that, who think that it's just getting powerful and pushing their way through things, is really setting boundaries and standing up for themselves. And that's not really what it's about. It's about doing what's best for you, protecting yourself, understanding what your needs are, what feels right for you, what feels wrong for you, and being the gatekeeper of those things, but you don't have to do it in an aggressive way.
Exactly.
It's just that, it's for some people, that transition between being completely passive and compliant to the point of now setting boundaries can feel so extreme, and some people don't know what to do with that. I always tell people, they're like, when I start setting boundaries, I feel kind of bitchy. And I'm like, yeah, because, sometimes you got to swing a little farther to the other way before you come back to center, but that's okay. I think it's part of the process.
So true.
So you spent a lot of years longing to escape life. And how are some of the ways that you did that, or tried to do that, I should say?
Oh, well, certainly thinking that the spiritual path was all about going beyond the ego, going beyond relationship, going away from, instead of realizing it's being right here in the world, meditating, even with, there's no sirens right now, even with the sirens that are here in New York City quite a bit, even with a hurricane coming on the west coast of Florida today, so just being with the difficulties and allowing them as best as we can, and paying attention, and being here, being present.
And this is a really important point, because it's very important that we understand we are, some of us want to be these spiritual beings. We want to be so cosmic and so, ethereal and all of that thing. But I think the most important thing is to understand that we need to be grounded in this human experience, right? So people who want to escape the ego and escape the human experience, I don't believe that that's a really healthy way. I think there has to be a blend. You can embrace that, but you have to first understand that you're rooted in the human experience and bring that into it, right?
Absolutely. And that took me a while to get. I really thought that the spiritual path was the key to, and the answer, by going away from reality. It was actually going away from reality. I thought, oh, you just sit there and you sing om, chant om, and everything's going to be wonderful. That's also bullshit. It doesn't make everything wonderful. So it just helps you to escape. So escaping I thought it was the answer. I really, 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 really did. And it's not.
And I think many people do. And I've had clients who went from being in a lot of pain in their lives to fully embracing this spiritual thing and sort of getting caught up in it and lost. And they end up back in crisis.
Well,
It doesn't take them, it ultimately brings them back to crisis because we cannot escape the reality of our lives. That's really important. And some people will say, well, I should be perfect. I should be giving. I should be, I'm here to help the world. And I said, that's not necessarily your role. Are you Gandhi? Are you Jesus? Are you Buddha? Yeah, there were certain entities that came here. That was their purpose. But for the average person, that's not our purpose. Our purpose isn't to be that pure essence. We want to tap into it, but it's not about becoming that. We have to be these physical human beings that we are. That's why we're here. That's the experience we're going for here.
so true. And to really embrace that we're imperfect. We're imperfect and going to make mistakes and have to apologize and move on. And that's being more human. It's about being like this real, regular human being. Mm-hmm. And it's more the school of life instead of having to be the school of dropping out. It's more like dropping in.
That's an old expression, but yeah.
I know, where did that come from?
Right, dropping in, dropping out. Right, that's an old one, but yeah, there you go. You coined it really well. So yeah, we're talking about. So now we're talking about. Okay, so then you just start discussing nourishment, and I think most of us think of nourishment as the food and the vitamins and minerals and things that we take into our body. But you talk about nourishment in a different way. So how do you see nourishment?
So in the book, I started with this experience when I was a very young mother on an airplane and realizing that I had to put the oxygen mask on me first. I was sort of devastated that I had to put the oxygen mask on me first. Oh, because if I'm not here, what good is it, the oxygen mask on the baby, if I'm not here?
Right.
So, and that's not a narcissistic statement. That's just the truth in that moment, right? I was the caretaker in that moment. And so, if you just take that experience when you've been on a plane or once we were on a boat, we had to take the class with the life preservers,
the vests and everything,
the vests and the little boats that you go on and all this kind of thing. It sort of like turned my mind around, and I think my heart around too, or maybe my heart was in the right place all the time, my mind wasn't. And I realized, oh, so I have to put the nourishment in me first, and not just the food that I eat, that too, but I have to really be with myself first in order to really be in relationship with whatever it is I'm doing and whoever it is I'm with in the moment. Mm-hmm. So really it's a moment-to-moment practice for me at this point, to be in relationship with where I am, and then I could open up to whatever it is that I'm in contact with during the day.
This is a crucial point because this concept, and you call it nourishment, which is a great way to say it, because when you talk about self-love, sometimes that sounds selfish to people. But when you say it as nourishment, it's a lot more palatable,
True.
No pun intended, but yeah. So, but you're right. People think that giving is the way to live life. And yet, if you don't give to yourself first, if you don't nourish yourself first, you have nothing to really give.
It's really true. And I used to be always giving, 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 because I thought that's how I should be. And what I was supposed to be as a girl, as a teenager, as a young woman, so on and so on. And I still will give too much at times. That said, if I don't nourish myself in all the different ways that I do, um, then there's nothing there. And what could happen is you could become resentful. If you're and a really sensitive person will pick up if you're not being generous from your heart, if it's not authentic. So, but most people aren't going to pick it up, right? So if you're giving, 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 because that's what a good person is, that's not the way to reach being a compassionate human being. Being a compassionate human being means you're having compassion for yourself first. You're kind to yourself first. You're forgiving yourself first. Otherwise, you're not really compassionate and you're not really generous. You're giving yourself away and then you feel empty, depleted, resentful, angry, arrogant, all the things that we really don't want to be.
Well said.
Thank you.
Very true. Very true. You know, you talked about perfection before, and then, you know, so now I've moved up to chapter 27 where you talk about imperfection, but you say, you know, what in the world ever made me think that perfection was the absolute goal? Why would that be my pursuit of happiness? And why would I pursue an impossible task? Because the irony of it all is that there's imperfection everywhere we look. A crack here, a blemish there, something is flawed, confusion, illusion, delusion. Why do we get so hung up on this perfection thing? Is this part of control?
I think you're right. I think it is. I think it's a part of control. And maybe the part of control is to not be in touch with who we really are in the moment and who we've been and where we come from. And I think it's related, as I'm saying this, I think it's related to avoiding shame.
Mm.
Because there's this shame place that you need to go through and heal. We think that I know that we think that if we're imperfect in this way, that means we're not good, or we should be ashamed of ourselves or something like that. But I haven't thought this through. It just
That's
came
okay.
now as we're talking.
That's good.
But I really think it's avoiding that trap of shaming yourself, self-hatred, and so on, by trying to always be perfect, which so I'm involved in this knitting stuff. I love knitting, been doing it since Girl Scouts as a young girl. And for a while after I became a mom, I took up quilting because I loved the Amish and how they quilted and so on. Well, I didn't stay with quilting more than a couple of years because there's so much perfection that you had to do in quilting. It made me crazy. And what's great about knitting is you could I put my knitting over there, is you can make mistakes and it's okay. Sometimes you go back, we call it frogging, where you take out what you've knit and then you redo it. Or sometimes you could just like patch it up in a certain way. So, and years ago, we sold jewelry, a lot of Navajo jewelry. We had a store called Purple Coyote out on Long Island. And there was one man that we bought a lot of his turquoise jewelry. And he said to the white people, us, he would he would make an imperfection in it because it wasn't spiritually the same selling to a white person as to a native person. And there was something very beautiful about that. So I knew that all the jewelry we were selling at the time had this in it. And that, in fact, felt very spiritual, that it was a conscious movement to have his beautiful turquoise jewelry have imperfection in it. And we sold a lot of his beautiful silver and turquoise. His name was Orville Ticini, if anybody's into native.
Oh, wow. You know, I was actually going to say, as we were talking about this, I remember, I used to go to my kids' classes in elementary school and help out and everything. And I remember, I can't remember which, I have two. I can't remember which child it was, but I remember the Native American unit. And I remember learning that Native Americans put little flaws in pretty much everything they do. And I also, so there's cultures that actually do this. There's the Japanese wabi-sabi, which, right, which, they value the broken and the, old and the cracked and those kind of things.
True.
But here in the United States, everybody's trying to, we're all trying to do it all right and be perfect, which is, and talk about shame. All it causes is it produces more shame, because the more perfect you try to be, the more you shame yourself because you can't get it right. It's impossible to get it right.
Possible. Yeah, it's just it's just a continuation of the whole neurotic story. Yeah.
What if we are already the wholeness? Okay. There's a quote in your chapter 33 about wholeness. You are already that which you seek, by Ramana Maharshi. And you say, what if we're already the wholeness that we long for? And what is wholeness anyway? Aren't we whole? Aren't we perfect just as we are?
So I would say we're whole and imperfect. So in that wholeness, there's imperfection. So we're born whole and immature. So as we grow, we can become more and more whole. So more and more who we are. So it's almost like we're born whole and immature, and then we take parts away from ourselves to survive. So we become, let's say, fractured. There's all different words that we use in the psychology world, whether it's fractured or wounded or damaged or something like that. So like in wabi sabi, I mean, there's a branch of the wabi sabi where they put beautiful gold into the pottery when there's a crack. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it because you talked about it. And instead of seeing the beauty of our imperfections within the wholeness, we're trying to eradicate it or separate from it, which makes us less and less and less whole. So wholeness is being in relationship, according to the way I think, being in relationship with as much of who we are and knowing that we are imperfect and that there is more. I feel like I'm constantly transforming myself every day, but I'm always working on myself, and not in a perfect way. I don't sit here and meditate 20 minutes. I do different practices, all different kinds of things. And it really makes a difference because I feel more in myself that way.
Do you think that there's a point in which we do need to fracture to come back to our wholeness?
Well, I think we have to be in touch with the fracturing that we already have.
Okay.
So in Kabbalah, they call it shattering. There was the shattering of the vessels. So there was the wholeness, and then there was the shattering, and then there's the reconciliation, the healing. And so everything was all one, and then it was split and separate, and then it was relational after the shattering. So I believe that that's really just another way of saying what you said, that there are fractures in us because it's part of the human experience. And I think it's more than just the human experience. I mean, I have one of my cats laying here. It's definitely part of the feline experience. I used to have lots of dogs, definitely that. And if you walk through nature, just even looking at a tree, all the different ways the trunks are shaped and the limbs, move, and it's all, there's not a perfect way for a tree to grow. There's not a perfect way for a plant to grow. And it knows how to grow. If it's watered, if it's nourished properly, it knows how to grow. It's pretty cool.
That's a great analogy. It's
Thank
beautiful. So many people that I work with, they're in pain quite often. And really, what I can identify about some of that pain, or a bulk of it, it's not really what's happening to them, it's what they're saying to themselves about what has happened to them, right? And you talk about that in chapter 33 about wholeness. So I like what you say. You say, if I was saying something negative myself, I might hear that voice and respond to it in a compassionate way, whereas in the past, I would curse it and summon it to be exiled. So now I say, oh, hi, I hear you. And that's not true. Or I laugh and I say, hi, acknowledging that voice in some compassionate way. It's pretty cool to experience this. I'd love for you to talk about this because this is so important for people to understand.
First, what I had to do is I had to wake up. I had to wake up to the fact that I was cursing myself, or that I was saying how bad I was. I had this core belief that I was bad. I think I wrote that in one of the chapters, that I had to wake up to that I was really bad. So I had to wake up to all the different ways, all the different things that I would say to myself. I had to make it conscious, because if I didn't make it conscious, it was the gerbil in the cage. I was going to keep going on and on and on and on and on. So it seems to me, because I've been working on this for a very long time, I'm in my late 60s, seems to me that it just keeps transforming, and then that voice is still there sometimes, maybe when I'm under stress, or like during going through this moving experience, I started to doubt my intuition. Now, I was a little bit surprised, but okay, this is what I was going through. I started to doubt myself with because we went through a lot of difficulties with the purchase of the apartment. And so not the selling of the house, that was easy peasy. But I knew that deep inside that that we would be fine wherever we were. But I'm usually very able to intuit. Oh, like when we came to see this apartment, I sat here and I closed my eyes and I felt it and it felt good, felt like I was going to live here. Then I started to doubt myself. So the doubting of the self, I would say, was the present day cursing of myself, or saying I'm stupid, I don't know what I'm talking about, ba, 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 ba. All those negative kinds of things, taking away, really, don't feel so good about yourself. Don't, who do you think you are? Those kinds of things, which I did to myself for a very long time, and it kept me small and safe. There's a way to be safe and not have to feel so small. So as I woke up and became conscious of all the things I was saying to myself, and learned that that's really not true. So what, I made a mistake. So what if, I did something or said something, or so what if the apartment didn't go through? We would have rented something. So
there's always a plan B.
One of my girlfriends said, I'm so happy you have a plan B. I said, oh, yeah. Because I said, oh, I was looking at rentals all weekend. So
there's always another option, there's always options that we have, if we don't lock ourselves into these rigid ways of thinking.
Yeah. It's like, I'll only be safe if it's like this. I'll only be safe if this happens. And that's not true.
That's right.
Not true.
We're much more resilient than we give ourselves credit for, right?
Have to open up to that possibility. You have to wake up to, I'm holding on so tightly.
I've noticed in my life, whenever things didn't go the way I wanted them to, it always worked out for the best. It always worked out better, because we don't always know what's best for us. Sometimes, whatever forces, the universe, God, spirit, whatever we want to call it, sometimes that knows much better for us than we do. And sometimes it gets in the way. and make something different happen. Like when we moved from Baltimore to Florida, and we were trying to buy a house, and I think we tried to put contracts on 3 different houses. I was feeling kind of desperate that I wanted a house. Had any of those houses happened, I would not have been happy, but none of them happened. One case, the real estate agent didn't even put the offer through. Another one rejected it. You know, it was like three things. It was like boom, boom, boom. What is going on here? And then my house showed up. So, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Like if you're driving in traffic and you got to get somewhere and you're cursing the person in front of you because they're going extra slow, or, you know, I always say, thank you, because there's a reason for this. I always try to find a reason for everything rather than trying to see it as wrong.
Right. There's always something we could take from a situation.
Hmm.
Like there's certain things that I can't make sense of. Childhood cancer, children dying really young,
Right,
earthquakes, so on and so on,
right.
because it brings so much horrible suffering and tragedy, really. So I can't make sense of it, but there's something to learn. Like, yeah, there really is climate change. There really is something going on here that's not like fires in Maui. Oh my God, right? So we always have an opportunity to wake up and say, okay, how come the systems of the water weren't thought out before? There was a problem up in Rhode Island also. There's a fire just,
Mm.
I think, last week. So people aren't paying attention to climate change the way we need to, and we need the younger generation to really help us if we're going to exist. Yeah.
Right. So with all this wisdom, and there's a lot of it here.
Thank you.
Okay. This book is really, really great. So for my listeners, wait a minute, I'm trying to get the right lightings here so I can get the whole sort of there. Okay. um, Really great book, really inspirational, and you take us on your journey. You really show us, all the the pivot, the ups and the downs and things that you went through to get to where you are.
Yeah.
Um, and about those, the way that we tend to talk to ourselves. I mean, I think no matter how much you work on that, there will always be times where you go, why did I say that? It sounded so stupid. And then, but now when I do that, I realize that's making me feel really bad. And then
Mhm.
then I think about it and I'm like, well, those people aren't making me feel really bad. It's me. I call myself on it and I'm like, cut it out. This is not, you don't need to do this to yourself. And then I stop. But I think we all kind of have to be aware of what we're telling ourselves about ourselves. And we can stop it, but you're right. You have to bring it to consciousness. You have to be aware that you're doing it. And most people aren't initially. It's one of the first things I have people do really is to, I say in the week between now and next time I see you, I want you to listen to what you're saying to yourself and maybe write it down,
Mhm.
You don't have to change it. I just want you to be aware of it. And
That's great.
that can be a huge breakthrough for people because they
Absolutely.
realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing this to me, right?
Yeah, it's a real wake-up call.
It is. So, closing words of wisdom, if you have any, Eileen.
Um, just be in touch with where you're at as best as you can and allow yourself to trip on the journey and back up and there's support. You don't have to do it alone. That's really important. And whether you're listening to podcasts or seeing people uh, to help support you, you don't have to do it alone. I don't think you can do it alone, right?
You need a different perspective that's
Different,
outside of you.
if there's a therapist or a coach or a therapist or a coach,
Right.
it really, really, really makes a difference. And if you don't like the first person you talk to somebody else. You don't have to stay where you're at.
That's exactly right. I completely agree with you. It is so important that we work these things out. And there's no stigma in getting a little bit of help. Sometimes it's just a little bit that you need. It's not going to be a whole makeover, a whole do-over of you. Sometimes it's just a tweak here and a tweak there that can just release so much. So I'm glad that you said that. Well, thank you. It's been a great conversation. I knew it would be. Good luck in your new condo or your new apartment, wherever you are. And it's just really been fun talking to you. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Randi.
Have a great day. Take care.
You too. Be well.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.